Thank you so much, Alex. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this lunchtime today. Emma and I are excited to take you through today's webinar. As Alex mentioned, it's part of our My Whole Self campaign. And so hopefully today we'll be, again, resharing some tips from what we talked about last year, but also thinking about how, in the space of a year, what's changed, what we can do differently, and thinking about how to just keep evolving our mental health tips as we continue to work from a virtual office or from home remotely. Get the next slide, please, Alex. So I am your host. I am Emma Afrifa-Chi. I'm Head of People, Wellbeing and Equity at Mental Health First Aid England. Emma, would you love to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Emma Tomes. I'm a Mental Health First Aid England instructor member, and I'm also a grief recovery specialist. So I work with people that experience bereavement, divorce or redundancy. And we've got our pictures on here that shares a little bit more about us as well. So on my picture, you can see that I'm a mum of two. I'm also a dog lover. Mindfulness has really helped me, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go through. And I'm also dyslexic, so that gives me some superpowers as well.
Thanks, Emma. Yes, so our actual pictures and the reasons why we've got those little captions on, and I will tell you some more later on, but as part of My Whole Self campaign, you can have a My Whole Self selfie. So I will tell you a little bit more about how you can get your selfies up and running and when those assets will be available. But that's in essence what some of these captions are. So some of these captions are just different identities or things of who we are. So I am a world traveler. I love traveling. I am also a foodie lover, a lover of food. I think my husband has said several times that he's never seen anyone that loves food like I do. So I'm definitely one of those. I also love animation. I love anything to do with animation or cartoons. I'm a very big kid at heart. So that is very much where I get some of my pleasure from. And I love going to the theatre, anything to do with Broadway, but also plays, and also love going to cinema. So as you can see, probably like the last year has been quite tough, but I have subscribed to Disney. And so I've been able to watch some of the movies, but in essence, that's who I am. And those are the different facets that make me who I am. So you will all have an opportunity to download your selfies and be able to share that as well. So what we're covering today, I'm not going to go into every single detail, but as you can see on the screen, this is today's agenda. We will be covering some tips around how to get around boundaries, connections, and then we'll also talk a bit more about My Whole Self in terms of the campaign and how you can get involved in that. Next slide, please, Alex. Thank you. So this is a resource that we actually produced last year for My Whole Self on the 18th of March. We have updated it since then, and this actually, Emma will go into a bit more detail about it, but it'll be also available to everyone after this session. But in essence, it's how you can support yourself while you're still working at home remotely. So I won't take away Emma's shine in terms of going to some of that, but you'll be able to get some, you'll be able to access this after today's session. So without other further ado, over to you, Emma.
Thank you so much. So we're going to share some hints and tips with you, and I think getting set up for work and having a routine has never been more important than the last year. So we know that having a regular routine can really help us. So it's going to lower our stress levels because we're not having to think as much if we're in a regular routine. It helps us to form good daily habits. We're able to take better care of our health because we're working in more of an intentional way. We can feel more productive, and also it enables us to have more focus. So Emma, what have you been doing that's been helping you to get set up and ready for work?
That's a good question. I'm laughing because we had a chat about this before, but I can honestly hand on heart say that when we were first in our, I've forgotten how many lockdown versions we're in now, but when we first started on our journey in lockdown back in March, I will definitely say I was a lot more proactive in how I set myself up to start. I had an absolute perfect routine where I'd get up and try and get some exercise in before I start my day. That has literally changed. I've not really been doing that much, but the key things that I've actually still kept within my routine has been setting my alarm clock. So my alarm clock goes off at 7 o'clock every morning, and making sure that I'm up, I'm ready, and also good to go my day in terms of, having my coffee, whatever it is. But one thing I've really found really helpful is on Microsoft, on Outlook, you're able to plan focus times. So usually I set myself up in the morning, again, regular routine, have some breakfast, and then I have a focus time. So usually between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, in my diary is focus time. So not many people are up at that time usually, but in my diary is focus time. And that whole hour I use to just prepare myself for the day. What's coming up in my day, what do I need to set aside to read, but also if there's things that I haven't been able to do the day before, that's the time I set to do it. And what's great about it is actually, it's called like Microsoft Analytics, I think it's called, but what it does is it takes your diary for the week and then maps out spaces where you can have focus time. So during my work week, I have focus time in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, and also at the end of the day. And I try not to put meetings in during that period unless it's absolutely necessary. So I have time to, again, have my focus. So yeah, habits like making sure we have lunch as well. So as an organization, we have agreed that between the hours of 12 and 1, that we try and avoid having meetings in there. So as an organization, we're able to have our lunch. So again, having that set up and making sure that at least we have that on our diaries to do that is something I've been doing. I haven't been doing greatly on exercise, I'm not going to lie, because for me, as I mentioned, I think I explained last year, my home has tended to be my sanctuary. So I don't really do well at working out at home, and I don't really do well in virtual workouts with like watching a screen and doing it. I'm more a person that goes to a destination, which is usually the gym, and gets involved in classes, which I love, or has a personal trainer to push me. But what I can say is that when I first started out on my lockdown journey, I was, like I said, I was doing exercise and going for runs every day. I don't necessarily do that anymore. But what I tend to do is towards the end of my week, set aside, my end goal is to have at least 3 sessions of keeping fit. If I do 1 or 2, I'm still winning. So then I don't put the pressure on myself to feel bad if I don't do 3 sessions. And usually my sessions will range from 30 minutes to 45 or an hour. And what I can say on average every week, I might either do between 2 or 3. I mean, if I do 3, I'm definitely winning, but on average it's 2. But the great thing about it is I've got a little sort of, I guess, mini gym. I've got kettlebells and all that stuff. And then I just watch motivational videos to get me in the groove of it. And I've also got a workout playlist, which also helps me really get motivated. So I guess I know I've kind of overshared too much, but I think
no, that's great.
To be more productive and just be realistic.
Yeah, and I think what was great to hear from what you were saying is, this being kind to ourselves. We set ourselves these targets and actually saying, do you know what, I did 3 or I did 2, and I'm okay with that. So I think being compassionate towards ourselves is really important. One of the things that I noticed, so I bought a coffee machine because I was really missing having a coffee, but then that also then meant that I was making more coffee, and having my water bottle to hand kind of slipped as part of one of my routines. So I'm very proud that I've got it back again, and I'm like, right, come on. And it's just being kind to ourselves, isn't it? And just having that self-awareness to be able to check in with ourselves, I think, is key. So we want to hear about those of you that have joined us today. So we're going to share a poll now. And our poll is around what things have you found most effective to help you create positive habits and a consistent routine. So if you can complete our poll, that would be great. And if there's something on the poll, or isn't on the poll, should I say, that you want to share, you can pop it in the Q&A, because we would love to hear what's been working for you right now. Whether it's getting your water bottle first thing in the morning and filling it up. So please let us know in the Q&A.
Yeah, and I'm looking at what's popping up actually, and I think it's really interesting. I think the water bottle is definitely something I actually do a lot more now. So with my coffee in the morning, I have a water bottle, and my average is to drink that whole water bottle by the end of the day. So and I agree with you, like little things like that just helps, and just having it in my visual as well. So I've got a place by a table where it sits, where I can't miss it at all. And then when I start to feel hungry, I'm like, am I hungry, or do I just need some more water? And it's usually if I have some more water and it doesn't work, then I need to get something to eat. But if not, I'll have the water. But yeah, I think it's little things like that, really, nudges.
Right, okay, the results are in. So what have we got here? So we've got our highest percentage here is around having a separate workspace from living space. And it may look like I'm sat in a cupboard right now, but this is me making that separate workspace. And it really does make the difference to be able to close the door and shut your laptop down at the end of the night. We've had some comments coming through in the Q&A, which is great as well. So daily morning gratitude practice, and I love this one. So being a huge fan of mindfulness, which has really helped me deal with anxiety and things like that. But so starting your morning with things that you're grateful for, and then also ending your day with things that you're grateful for, I think is a really nice habit and routine to get into. Let's have a look. What other comments have we got?
There's one about a sad lamp.
Oh, yeah.
I think is really good actually as well in terms of lighting. I mean, luckily we're getting out of, the days are getting brighter, and so are the nights slightly getting darker later. But yeah, I think the sad lamp is also a really good idea. I did look into getting one, well, more so with the winter months, and it just helps lift up the room.
Yeah, definitely. And Kirsty's saying, getting outside for some daylight a few times per week. Yeah, really getting outside, seeing the sky. And as basic as that might sound, it really can help us feel better. So that's great. Okay, well, thank you for sharing. We've also got some comments in there about getting out and walking, which is really good, really great exercise too. Okay, so let's move on. So let's talk about boundaries. And I feel like we kind of started that conversation where you were talking about this concept of blocking out time. And so really being clear about what we need to be productive and effective and to be able to look after ourselves. So using clear, specific and non-judgmental language. So I do a lot of workshops, and I talk about the fact that as human beings, we find it difficult to ask for help anyway. But what we often do when we do ask for help is that we're not really specific about what help we need. And then we get frustrated with our colleagues and our loved ones because then they're not giving us what we need and the support and help that we need because we're not being specific. So that's definitely one that I've been working on throughout lockdown. So yeah, the focus on what you want or need, remembering to empathize, hear and verbally reflect the other's needs and feelings. So not only do we need to be mindful of our own boundaries, so great examples there are about blocking out time in the calendar, being really clear about what we need to stay healthy, but also respecting other people's, because they might be different from ours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think boundaries is very much around communications and actually managing people's expectations. And I know that it's easier said than done sometimes, especially when you have a seniority relationship and or you're a direct report of somebody, or you're reporting into someone else. But I think not having the conversations and understanding of how you're going to work, which ways you're going to work, will not enable or be conducive to relationships. And I think sometimes we are fearful, but often enough, if we just take that leap of faith to have the conversations around actually, these are my working hours. I don't expect you to be responding when I'm working, outside of these hours. That's my choice. Or actually, I'm going to take a bit of a break here and there, or, because it's very much about outputs. And I think one of the key things when we're talking about boundaries, but also looking at it from the perspective of how we're working in today's environment, we are working quite a lot. And, there is this conversation that needs to be continued to have, but also put into action in terms of just being really clear and being more lead with a lot more empathy and understanding that people are going to be working differently because they'll have different responsibilities. If you look at it from an inclusion perspective, there are people that are sharing a house with parents, with family, with children at the moment. So again, what does that look like, and what boundaries need to be set so people are able to be productive, switch on when they need to, but also have those periods of rest or break that they need. I mean, at Mental Health First Aid England, we do have these conversations, but we also know we're also talking about it from a perspective of letting people know that that permission is there to do that. If I don't, someone asked a question, I think, about how do you homeschool in this environment? Again, it's setting that expectation of, okay, between these hours and these hours, I'm going to be homeschooling, so I'm not available, but I will pick up on this and be available as soon as I finished after these hours. And again, when people are putting meetings in your diaries, we actually have set our meetings so that a 30-minute meeting finishes at 20 25 minutes beforehand, and an hour meeting finishes at least 10 minutes beforehand. So at least you've got a break in between. So just even take a glass of water if you need to, or go to the, or whatever it is. But it's putting some of these mechanisms in place. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's the conversation that needs to be had, but there's also putting things in place to enable those boundaries to happen. It's one thing to talk and not actually do stuff, because then it just becomes counterproductive. So yeah, I think that listening to people and also reevaluating things. If it's not working, have a conversation of how you can make it work. If it's working, great, then just continue to do it. But I think that's constant check-in to see, are my boundaries still standing? Do we need to change something? How is it working for you? Are we both in the same place in terms of expectations and managing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And something I get asked a lot is around being able to say no. So this feeling that we've always got to say yes to everything. So we get sent a meeting invite, or we're asked to do a piece of work, a project, or something like that, and not feeling that we can say no or challenge that in a healthy way. So I think when it comes to saying no, it's thinking about, well, if you're not able to do that request, what can you do? Providing options, having a conversation around it. So yeah, I think having those options is really important as well, isn't it? It's part of that relationship.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this thing around saying no is because people say no and then nothing else follows after that. I do think that there is, again, it's renegotiating, right? So if you can't do that, or if you have to do that, what has to give? Because something does have to give. And if something can't give, what's the alternative? So if you can't do it at that time, actually probably recommending another time. Normally, sometimes when I get invites in my diary and I know I'm back to back, I will either decline and suggest another time, because then, and obviously checking if I can see people's diaries, but checking to see it suits the other individual, but I'll request another time because I know I need that space. So again, it's kind of what is the counter offer to the no, rather than it just being a bold no, I can't do it. And often, sometimes there's a way where you negotiate and you find a way that actually works for both of you.
Yeah, definitely. It's that, it comes back to that communication again, doesn't it? Is being able to express and say what we think, and how it's having an impact on us. Okay, so we've got the quote on there. Boundaries are part of self-care. They are healthy, normal, and necessary. So it's okay to have boundaries, and actually it's okay to support and respect other people's boundaries as well. So we've got another poll, some more interaction for you. So we'd like to know, to what extent would you agree with this statement? So since working in a virtual office, I found it to be more difficult to switch off from my work. So let us know. We're going to reveal the poll for you now. Let us know whether you strongly agree, somewhat agree, neither agree or disagree, or somewhat disagree or strongly disagree. Where do you stand on this one, Emma?
So it depends, if I'm honest. So have I found it difficult to switch off? It depends on if something is, everything is urgent, but if something actually, depending on the deadlines I need to do. So I would say yes and no. Sometimes I do, if I'm working towards something and it needs to meet a deadline, and then I have to do it. But other times, actually, when I close my laptop, I close my laptop. One thing I did really notice the other day, actually, that was creeping in though, is that I have my emails on my phone. So I have to stop looking at my emails, because that's where I think being able to switch off is hard. And we really have to be disciplined in ourselves to do that. It's one thing where you can walk away from your laptop or work away from your screen, because once you're away from that, unless you vitally have to come back to do something, you can ultimately sometimes stay away from that. So when I close for the day, whatever it is, and I walk away from my laptop, I'm generally quite good at staying away from my laptop. However, it's when I'm like in bed or sitting down and I'm on my phone and I'm looking at other stuff, and then my work phone, or a Teams thing jumps up. That's where I have to be more disciplined and say, no, I'm switching off from this, because it can wait till tomorrow morning, or actually it's my day off. So why am I even bothering? Yeah. What is actually quite good is sometimes when I have my day off, I actually uninstall my Teams or my emails from my phone to stop me from actually going in to check, let me just see if everything's okay, type of thing. So I would say I need to get better, but I have improved, but I still need to get better when it comes to my mobile phone device and switching off. But in terms of my laptop, when I do leave, I'm pretty good at leaving it there the other day. for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like our poll agrees with you. So we've got 38% at somewhat agree and 37% at strongly agree. What would be great is if we could get some comments through on the Q&A around from those people that disagree with this statement. It would be great to hear what you've been doing, what's been helpful, so we can share on this session. That would be really, really useful.
And one of the other things I don't do, I mean, I think some workplaces you can't do anyway, but sometimes you can access your work framework from the web, depending on the security and all that stuff. But I literally do all my work from my work laptop. I don't encroach any of that stuff onto my personal laptops. I mean, the securities and all that stuff, but generally, depending on where you work, you can access sometimes from the web portals your domains, but I keep them separate. I don't put the two together.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of people commenting in the Q&A. So we've got Laura. I found it easier to leave on time because I'm in control of when I shut my laptop down. Gillian saying switched off Teams notifications on my phone has helped a lot. So these notifications, they're such a distraction, aren't they? So being able to switch those off and gain control of, when we do have time to do different tasks and things like that. Brilliant. Okay. And Tanya's talking about taking the dog for a walk. Excellent. All right. Okay. Some really great comments coming through. So really appreciate those comments coming through in the Q&A. All right, let's move on then, shall we? So connection, that feeling of connection with our colleagues when we're working in this virtual world. And we've got some information here from Action for Happiness, which talks about strengthening our relationships and building connections is essential for our happiness. And, we know when we have that human connection, it really can lift our mood. So we've got in here, check-ins with colleagues are vital in the virtual office. Because organic social interactions are reduced. And I have a little question that I asked myself that's in my diary, which says, who should I reach out to this week? Because we tend to kind of stay within a fixed network, and sometimes you don't get that, oh, I've just bumped into somebody that I haven't spoken to in a while walking around the office. So I ask myself that question every week, who should I reach out to this week? How do you go about making sure that you stay connected, Emma?
It's a good question. So, it's also interesting you say that, because my role has expanded since last year. And what I realized about my role, that with the expansion I have opportunity now to talk to a lot more people, because you're absolutely right. We stick to the clusters of who we know or within our immediate teams. Whereas now, as part of my role anyway, I'm always having to think about who to connect to differently. So for me, it's quite similar to what you do. I'm like, who have I not spoken to today or this week that I should check in on and see how they're doing, or who haven't I spoken to in a while that I should check in on. So I always kind of ask myself that question once or twice a week to see who I have, and then just either drop them a quick hi or find out when they're free for lunch or coffee. But sometimes it's also really hard to do because we keep talking about this overspilling in terms of we're just so busy and there's just no time because our diaries are like super filled. But one of a good way, and actually one of our teams do this really well, is that they have open virtual spaces. So in their diary, they just invite everybody in the team or who else is not in the team for a space of time, and you can drop in and drop it out. And it's just like a I guess a collaboration space you'd have had in the actual.
I like that, like a virtual cafe type thing.
And it's like exactly like a virtual cafe. So from 12 to probably 5 or from 12 to 3, it's sent out to the team, and then you just drop in, and you can still be working on what you're working on, but you're connected to each other virtually, and it's still like you're having that conversation, which I think is a great way of doing it as well, and trying that with different people. So that's how I try and check in. But my thing is to try and check in a bit more with just very much different people, especially just having the people hat on. It's good, because I think sometimes with HR, people just come to us when they need something to be done rather than just come to us just for the conversation. So it'll be just nice to change that narrative and have that open door policy, and not because you want to check up on a HR thing, but just to see how you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some bullet points here where it talks about people with strong, broad social relationships are happier, healthier, and live longer. So, you know, it's plenty of benefits for us doing this and putting the work into our connections. It also makes relationships easier, doesn't it? It makes projects easier if we've got those strong relationships. Provides meaning, support, and increases our feelings of self-worth as well. And broader networks create this sense of belonging, which is really, really key. Okay, so let's have a look. Right, okay, so this is a bit of a cheeky one. So this is our kind of check-in partway through the session. So in all honesty, since the webinar began, have you checked your emails or work messenger applications? So we've been talking about this idea of these notifications pinging up and distracting us. But honestly, and you know, this is a rhetorical question, honestly, have you checked your emails or been distracted by something else that's gone on during this webinar? So if you want to let us know your thoughts in the Q&A, go for it. Emma, what's your experience of this when, you know, because, you know, I remember when I used to do training face-to-face with line managers, and we'd say, right, if you're doing a one-to-one, put the laptop away, put your mobile phone away, but it's all there in front of us, isn't it, when we're working virtually?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts around this?
So since the webinar, clearly not, although I've had pinging in the background and avoided it. But I think this is really interesting because, again, you can't force people to turn on their cameras, for example, when you're having sessions in one-to-ones. I will encourage everybody to, because I think it also builds a bit more trust, but also I know some people have off days. So as managers checking in, we need to think about the non-verbal cues of how we can connect with our direct reports, so that they to know when we can speak to them if we don't see them visually, so to speak. But I think it's easier to do because when you're not being watched, you can do whatever you want. And actually what's really interesting, and I've done a couple of training sessions where I've waited till the end, and obviously everybody says bye, and then you have those couple of people that the black screens are still on, and they're like, oh, so you have not been paying attention because you just said goodbye and left a long time ago. And I sit there and I wait, and then I'm like, okay, so are you coming back? And it's really funny because sometimes people are embarrassed and they apologize, or they just leave abruptly. But I think in an environment where you don't have people looking at you, so to speak, it's easy to do because you're not checking. But also in meetings, but I've also noticed it when we were having meetings and we were still sitting face to face, there were some people coming in with their mobile phones, and this is not virtually, this is pre-COVID. Yeah. We were in an actual building. People would still come with their mobile phones and kind of be checking it in meetings. I think it's rude. So I think, you know, it's always good to have, again, coming back to boundaries, setting scenes when you're doing your meetings, making sure that people know, encouraging people to switch things on, cameras on, and to be absolutely present in the moment. And also sometimes you can tell if they're not, because you can always ask questions to find out who really actually is present in the moment or not. There's ways around finding if people are engaged or not, but I do think it's increased since we've worked remotely.
And I think, you know, I think often we forget that body language is still there and people are still looking at you on camera. And although you might think, oh yeah, they can't see it, you know, so it's being honest, isn't it? And saying, look, actually, I just need to finish this and then I'll be fully with you, or being able to be fully present within that meeting. It's really interesting the level of honesty that we've had come through in the Q&A. So Trevor is saying, yes, multitasking, sorry. And then we've got a comment that's come through saying, only distracted by chocolate buttons. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So Stephen's saying he switches off his VPN so he can't access emails. Yeah, absolutely. And we've got Nicole saying it feels even more difficult being part-time working virtually. So thinking about the challenges that brings as well, and you know, particularly thinking about relationship building when you know you're working on a part-time basis. So yeah, excellent. Okay, well, thank you for your honesty, everybody. So our next slide, our next kind of discussion points are all about putting well-being before work. And you know, I saw someone's comment in the Q&A where it was kind of guilty, and I know that I have been guilty of this. I think when you are so passionate, or you're you've got a really difficult deadline that you're working towards, when you attend a meeting or a one-to-one with someone, you can go straight into work, can't you? What's happening? What's going on? And putting well-being first is so important, isn't it? So we've got some tips on here. So we've got always start by discussing how we're feeling before talking about workloads. And this is something I get asked a lot around, well, how do I have that conversation? And I think there's some resources that we're going to go through in a moment, but just asking how are you today is a really great question. It encourages people to think about the here and now, doesn't it? So it's how are you in this moment today? And it's a really great open question. So that's something I would encourage. Amma, any tips from you on that one around how to have the conversation, how to get it started?
I think just even asking, or just even being, just even starting that conversation, like let's check in on how you're doing. Let's put well-being first. Then at least that person will know, okay, great, you are asking the question, and then ask the questions of how you're doing. You can ask directly by using questions, but actually just even saying, look, I'm just going to park this for now. I want to hear how you're doing. How was your evening last night? If it's the first thing in the morning, did you manage to get your breakfast before we jumped in this call? If you're meeting someone at lunch, did you eat something? That kind of stuff helps, and also changes the conversation, because it's not just about how you're doing, because sometimes people just don't want to talk about how they're doing. But if you ask them direct questions, again, relating to their day or their night before, then it's up to them if they want to have the conversation with you. But it does make a difference. And also when you focus on things for them to answer rather than it be very generic, you can then build on that. So if someone says, oh yeah, I had this for lunch. Oh really? What was it? It can continue to something else other than really either short, sharp or very quick questions. So I would put that as as an upfront thing. Or actually, even if you start the conversation and you forget to put well-being first and you remember, often you do, an apology of like, you know what, I should have started this properly. You know what, let's pause. Tell me about how you're doing, actually. There's always ways to fit it in. I think that putting it in first is obviously the better way to do it. But I think the number one thing you should be thinking about is before you get off that call, making sure you've asked that person how they feel. And actually, sometimes if you start off with work first, but end with their well-being and actually give them a really good positive note or just a positive feeling at the end of it, or at least they've been heard or you've thought or considered them, it works either way. So I think obviously best practice is to start with it first, but I think the better practice is to make sure you never end a call without asking how somebody's doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's great. So the tips that we've got here are being present, eliminating distractions. We've talked about that around notifications, and if you're going to take that time, really sit down and be present and be available to listen as well, because if we're going to ask these great questions and we're not fully listening, they're not necessarily going to really share and talk openly. Keeping our language open and empathetic is key, isn't it? And not every conversation has to be a video call. And I think that, oh my goodness, like I'm so grateful for the technology that we have, that we can get on video camera and stuff like that. But we know as human beings, we like variety. So that's okay, isn't it? If you can do a traditional phone call or you can do a walking meeting, it's keeping the variety in there as well.
100%. I think definitely switching it up, I have had calls with people actually running, which is interesting because it's really funny. I guess it's building stamina, because as they're running, I'm like, I can actually hear every word you're saying and you're pretty coherent. But I agree. I think taking off videos, Zoom, having a normal call, going for a walk, it's all of that stuff really also helps. And also you get the chance to get out, have some daylight and actually do some exercise too.
Yeah. And also I think this is really key, remembering where further support can be accessed. So we talk about it on the mental health first aider course. Do you know where to signpost to? What have you got within your organisation? Helpline support, having that in your pocket and really knowing where you can offer additional support is going to be really key when we're thinking about these kinds of conversations at work. So being prepared for that is also really important. Brilliant. Okay, so I think we're now going to have a look over to you, Emma, to look at my whole self MOT.
Yeah. That's me. Yeah, no. So so my whole self, I think, everything that we've talked about today, Amber, is actually crucial to the whole My Whole Self campaign. As mentioned, we launched this on the 18th of March last year, and we talked about connections being even more than ever now, because we're going into more remote working, the importance of what that looks like. But also throughout last year, a majority of our conversations around mental health and well-being was linked around inclusion. And, there's a lot of things with the Black Lives Matter movement that all linked into this. So, our My Whole Self MOT is very much similar to some of our other MOTs, but with a lens and focus predominantly around my whole self. And we always have this question, we always ask this question, well, what does it mean to be or bring your whole self to work? And actually it being more of a choice for someone to decide to want to do that, as opposed to a mandatory perspective. But also what we realize is that people can't do that anyway. It's more people opt out than opt in. So I think this MOT is really good because it just really thinks about the simple ways in which you can look after your whole self through asking the right questions, and also sense checking where you are with your mental health and well-being, and very much looking at it from an inclusive perspective of you as a human being. So, thinking about how my mental health is today. So again, doing those checks of how do I feel? How do I feel mentally? How do I feel physically? And being very honest with yourself. And if not, what is it and why do I feel that way? And how can I make myself feel better if needed to be? Or actually, it's okay to feel that way. How do I just, make sure that I'm looking after myself whilst I am going through those feelings? We mentioned our stress container, which we always talk about in our, can we quickly go back to the last, thank you. We mentioned our stress container as well. So again, how full is that? We talk about that in our courses, but it's again, looking at how full is that? What is it that needs to come out of it? So again, that you're not having those stress levels and you can bring those down. I'm not going to go into every single one, but again, you will have this at the end of our session. So it's great prompters, as I like to call it, also great nudges for you to self-check yourself every day. How am I doing? Where am I? What do I need to develop? And how to look after yourself. So what is My Whole Self is all about? I mentioned that, and we are again launching again on the 18th of March. So this will be our second year running, which is great, but there's lots and lots of ways you can get involved, and look out for the assets, which will be all ready and available on Wednesday next week. So it's Wednesday, the 10th of March. But in essence, that's actually Simon, our CEO, doing his selfie. But you can we're looking for people to share their My Whole Self selfies on social media and tag us in. Practice self-care using the MOT guide I just shared with you. Look around discussion panels. Join the My Whole Self webinar that actually you'll get more details about. Again, that will be shared, and that's happening next week. And look about just things around how you can do a book club. There's different things that you can connect with, where the theme is around how do you, in essence, be your whole self, bring your whole self, whether it's in the virtual space, whether you're connected with friends and family, around all of that stuff. But it's very much our campaign around workplace culture change. And how do we continue to create inclusive environments that really speak to mental health and well-being, as well as inclusion. All the information, as you can see, can be found on our website. So yeah. Spread the word. I'm like, what else is there to say? But spread the word. Show how you can support by using our hashtag My Whole Self on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. All the graphics, as I said, are ready to download on our website, and the assets will be ready next week. So really, really encourage you all on this call, spread the word, and just join our campaign in order to change workplace culture.
Right.
So we're good for Q&A now, aren't we?
Q&A, absolutely. I think those resources are going to be brilliant, aren't they? Because, we've already talked about people being really busy. So having those things that are really easy and accessible, being able to jump on a quick call with all of your sort of well-being representatives within your organization, and talking about how can we encourage and support this. And I love the selfie. I just think that's really cool.
Oh yeah, the selfie is fun. It takes a bit to get to know, but I mean, I'm sure the selfie guru is there. It's literally a filter. You can apply it it's on Instagram. It's fabulous. I took quite a few different ones last year, so I need to up my game and do a couple as well and share that differently. But yeah, the selfie idea is pretty cool.
Excellent. Right, so we've got some questions coming through. So let's have a look. Oh, right. Okay, so first question in here is around, are there any tips for how to balance homeschooling with work? And oh my goodness, it's such a challenge. It really is. And just acknowledging that, I think, when so I have a teenage son, and when it all kind of first started happening, this homeschooling idea, it's something I said I would never do. And there I am doing it. And I think it's just like all of this. It's just communicating with the school. What is reasonable, what is achievable for you to be able to do, working with your employer, sharing, and also thinking about what's coming up ahead. So for example, my son needs to go in for a COVID test prior. So it's just having those conversations and saying, I'm concerned what might happen. There's a couple of outcomes. He might end up going back into school. He might not. So keeping those lines of communication open, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think workplaces have got a responsibility to see how we support our employees, especially those that are homeschooling or caring, to allow them the time to do that. And actually, this is around setting the boundaries and expectations, right? So if you are homeschooling, I agree, it's having the conversation with the schools to understand what's achievable, what can be done, but having similar conversations to say, look, I need with the workplace to say, whether it's direct report, whatever, to say, look, I need to homeschool from these hours to these hours. During those hours, I'm not going to be available, but then I'm going to be available after this time. So then when people know, they should respect those boundaries and understand that. And then that's how you then think about how you get your teams together to work differently, but also then enable those people to work in the times that they can. It's very similar, not shift, I was about to say shift work, but it's not exactly shift work, but it is, you work in patterns, right? And you discuss what those patterns look like. What does the week ahead look like for that pattern? What is it, what is it, so then people don't get necessarily upset or disgruntled because they know what's coming and they're able to prepare for that in advance, rather than expectations and nothing's being said. And then, no one's communicating with each other. But I do think it's a two-way street, that employers do need to support their employees. But also there's an expectation of communicating and resetting those boundaries as and when is needed. It's not hard. It's not hard. It is not easy. It's very difficult. But I think it's, again, not being fearful of, oh, well, will I be penalized? It's around that psychological safety that we talked about last time. If you don't have those conversations, then you won't be able to let that happen. But if you can't have those conversations, and speaking to HR probably will be the next best thing, if you can't have it with your managers or whoever you report into. But I just don't think sitting there, don't sit in silence, do talk to somebody. You can get the support you need.
And there are some organizations as well that have almost kind of internal communities and support networks. So working parents, working carers, having that kind of support network, so you can reach out to one another and ask for hints and tips, because again, it's depends on the age as well of the child and all these different things. So being able to speak to people that are in similar situations can really help. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got some more questions coming in. Right, okay, so how do you manage people asking how they are? Okay, so how do you manage asking people how they are when you have 12 or more people in a meeting? Okay.
Wow, so that's a good question. And also it depends on how long the meeting is. If you have 12 or more people, you can still do a quick round robin, see how people are. And then, some people might just be, I'm okay or fine. Again, this is around listening for the cues. And we do train in our courses, as you know, Emma, we do train people to just listen out for the cues, and also both the verbal and non-verbal. But I think not asking people in the room is equally as not great as asking and then moving on. So I think what I would recommend, if you're a group of 12, is either you can go ahead of time and say, I'm going to be asking everybody how they are in the room. I want you to think about one thing that you want to share with the group. So at least people know coming ready for that meeting that they'll be sharing stuff. Or you can even do it in that meeting where you're asking how everybody is. Share one thing that you are happy about today or been able to achieve. And then that way you can go around the room, have everybody say something. And then I think you should always be having one-to-one check-ins anyway with the individuals in the room if they are your team. So making sure you follow up with an actual full check-in afterwards in your catch-ups or whatever it is. But that's how I would probably recommend approaching it if you have 12 people or more in a room.
Yeah, and I think something that's worked quite nicely for me is allowing time within your meeting, so it finishes early, but you hang on for any questions, or if anyone wants to have a chat or anything like that. So being able to, I think sometimes we're so quick to leave a meeting to go to the next one that there isn't that time to reach out and perhaps ask a question or talk about something that you didn't want to mention in front of other people. So being able to hang back can be quite helpful.
I completely agree, Emma, actually. And I think also looking at how you set up your meeting. So I guess the question is what is that meeting for? So if it's a meeting to discuss something or a topic, or is it a team check-in meeting? They're very different things that stand for different reasons, you know. So what I probably would recommend and tend to do is, like, with my teams, I have just a strictly well-being check-in. So that's all we're meeting to do, to discuss how are you feeling, how was your day, how was your weekend, and I try and set that up at the beginning of the week more so than the latter end. If I'm in team meetings where it's actually more of a collaborative space, I will always start by asking how's everybody's day going, and then open it up for the room to speak to. And then if everybody kind of chips in, fine. If you sense check that people aren't, then you carry on with the meeting. So again, it's just being able to drop the nuggets, drop the questions, to open up that environment, and then be able to see how you then continue that if you're not getting the answers back from people that you're hoping to. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay, and another question for you, Emma. Let's see how you feel about this one. So yeah, this is really interesting, actually. So how much do you think health and well-being of staff falls on HR department to manage, or the line managers? I have some thoughts on this one. Yeah, go for it.
If the people team are being business partners with the business, then it's 50. I believe it's 50-50. I think there's an onus of people teams not being able to see the day-to-day. We support the business, absolutely, and we do everything we can to help support the business in terms of whatever that looks like. But we're not in the day-to-day. We're not sitting in with your teams all the time. So I think the first point of call and the first point of contact is always with the line manager, and to understand how you support your individuals that way. And then HR comes into play to see how we support both you and the individual to make sure you're both getting the support. How many times can I say that word? That you need. You know, I think there's also probably some times where we have to think about where HR needs to intervene and take that responsibility, versus actually where the manager can run with it on their own. I think that, you know, the people team or HR, whatever you want to call them, are very much there to support the business, but also to empower the business to be able to do the things that they need to do. There's responsibilities as leaders and as managers that you should know as a people person who is managing people, that you have to get very comfortable with and dealing, so that you know and understand how that you can then support that individual better. But also at the same time, managers need support too, right? So checking in with HR to say, actually, what is it? Am I doing the right things? What should I be doing more? Is absolutely something that manager should do. But equally, if that individual does not have that support that they need from their manager, or the relationship from their manager, coming to HR is also another avenue for us to support that individual. So I see HR either being mediators or empowering people to do so, but also sometimes we will probably be the ones leading on it. All depends on the situation.
Yeah, and I think this is why, you know, now more than ever, the investment in supporting managers to have great conversations, you know, is so essential, isn't it, to help and support them and give them the knowledge and understanding to make that happen. Yeah,
and I think it's really critical that people understand their roles and responsibilities and what they are accountable for, because otherwise it becomes, oh, that's HR's responsibility, not mine, or that becomes, oh, that's an inclusion issue that's not embedded in the business, or that's just the thing over there that's a bolt on and I don't have to do that. We should all be approaching our workplaces and workspaces as we are all accountable for something or responsible for something. And what does that look like when we are shaping our pipelines, our people, whatever that is? We all need to know, as a manager, this is my responsibility and this is what I'm accountable for, and this is what I will get support in. That way people don't have blurred lines around understanding what they need to do and what they don't, and people really know how they can feel empowered to deliver what they need to deliver, and also support staff and members as they need to.
Absolutely. Brilliant. We've also had a question saying, when can people get access to all of the great resources?
Ooh, I'm pretty sure, I think it's the 10th. So as of next week, Wednesday, you should be able to get hold of all the resources, but everything that we're sharing on today's slide, you should be able to get after this session, if I remember correctly. Yes, that's.
Yeah, and on the website, there's also resources on there around the stress container that you mentioned already. So if you want to hop along to the website to see what resources are already there, because they're awesome as well. But as of the 10th, the My Whole Self resources will be available. Right, okay. And I've just had a note come through saying that we will share the recording and the slides. So if anyone, and I'm always the first person on one of these kind of sessions, I think it's the trainer in me that's, are we going to get a copy of the slides? Absolutely, you will get a copy of the slides and the recording.
Yeah, definitely. You will not be left without enough resources to help you both, spread the word of the campaign, but also help support you within your virtual spaces. I think there's a question that asks, as a manager of a team who are both at the workplace and remote, I find it more difficult to engage well with those at home. This is causing a division within the team. Thoughts? Since I asked the question, I'm going to ask you, Emma, and then I'm going to answer.
Yeah. I one of those things, it's kind of going back to the team, I think, and just kind of opening those lines of communication and saying, look, we're finding this difficult right now. What do you think is going to help? And I think by engaging with the team and asking them what they want and what they feel they need is going to mean that they're going to be more bought into it. So it's that recontracting piece that we were talking about earlier. And I noticed that someone asked a question around, there's this kind of, can be a bit of a culture of, you've always got to have your video camera on as well. So I think being able to sit down as a team and going, right, okay, we've been working like this for a while now, what's working? And this is what breakout rooms are brilliant for, isn't it? So right, team A, you're going to look at what's working, team B, what's not working for us as a team, coming back together and then just recontracting and saying, well, there may be some times when I don't want to have my camera on, or there may be a moment during a meeting where I do need to turn my camera off, and it's just having those agreements up front. So for that person, I'd really encourage as a manager to get a session just to say, right, let's get it all out. What's working, what's not, what are your ideas? And giving some people some time to think about what some of their ideas might be before they come along, because you'll be amazed by what ideas people will have about how they would like to work. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Anna, what are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. And I think if you haven't been, again, resetting, having your team health checks, and you've just been doing it for the last year, this is an opportunity for you to do it. I think you should have been doing it anyway. And I know it's hard, it's difficult, but if your team are fractioned, or if your team are divided, and let's face it, probably as we are all allowed out again, for whatever better word, and things start to, reopen, etc., we will be having hybrid spaces where you'll have people working remotely and not. What you need to do, as you said, Emma, is bring everybody for a reset. Mm-hmm. We've been working this way for however months. I've noticed that this is not working or not happening. I really want us to think about how we work together going forward. I know some of us will be working remotely, some of us will be working in the office. What are the things that matter to you? What is more important? How do you want to connect and engage with each other? How should we do that? What should we do? How do we come together as a team? What are we going to do to come bring us together as a team? Even though we're both working in different ways, we should actually come to agreement that on whatever day or however days in the week, we're coming together as a collective to share things, talk about it, find out how everybody's doing. I think that you really should do that, and more often than not, because we are working in an evolving things where things change. So I agree with you, having that conversation and being really open about it, doing your breakout rooms or whatever it is, to make sure that you have renegotiated how you work, renegotiate the expectations that you have as a team, and how you're going to be connecting with each other, and doing that and changing that probably every 3 months, 6 months or whatever, really helps, because then you're not taking things for granted. Things don't go to that extreme where people then start feeling, oh, well, it's us against them and people are getting favored over others. But also when you're doing that recontracting, you give people back the responsibility to own things in that recontraction. Because otherwise what it becomes is a space where people throw ideas and nobody takes responsibility for doing those ideas, or people just have a vent but nobody offers any solutions. So whatever you plan, make sure that yes, it's a space to people to say how they feel, but then that's followed by solutionizing, and that's followed by people taking accountability and again responsibility for whatever is suggested to try, but also giving it a space to say, we'll try this out, we're going to be flexible, and if it doesn't work, we'll come back and we'll see how it goes. But everything comes with a conversation, and that's when negotiation starts, and that's when expectations get managed.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, one of the great things about having all of these digital tools. You know, we can straight away, we can get up a shared Word document or whatever that looks like. So one member of your team can be scribing, you know, so sharing that out, and also thinking about who do you want to chair that session as well. You know, does it have to be it doesn't always have to be the line manager, does it, or the people manager? So yeah, brilliant. Cool. All right. Okay. I think we're nearly time's up, aren't we?
Yes. Oh gosh, yeah. 2 minutes left to go. Time does fly.
I know. Yeah, certainly does. So what have we covered? We have looked at getting set up. So getting set up and remembering those habits and routines that are so important. Those boundaries, and, you know, respecting others' boundaries and being clear about what our boundaries are. Putting well-being before work, and you know, like you said, even if you get partway through the conversation, it's okay to go, oh, do you know what, actually let's put this to one side and have a good chat. We looked at the My Whole Self MOT, which I think is a great conversation starter for team check-ins, you know, sharing these resources, asking their feedback on it. What do they like? What could we implement? I think it's going to be a really good conversation starter for organisations to think about how they can introduce this at work. So some great stuff in there for people managers too. Yeah, and then we had some fantastic questions and lots of interaction, which is always good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really enjoyed these sessions. That you know, and I think, you know, just to end and just wrap up, actually, one of the last questions we talked about, what happens if you don't have different spaces to go to? I think as we've talked through all these different things, the key thing to remember about well-being is that it is a continuum. So it's about creating what you can when you can, and also finding the spaces and creating those spaces within themselves. It is hard when you haven't got the luxury of going to different rooms or having different spaces, but I think it still sets the boundaries, right? It's very much around, if I have limited space, how do I create time within those spaces to make sure that I am stopping and starting stuff? So, you know, if I can't move from one room to another and I'm always stuck with that room, how do I make sure that I am at least giving myself time out in between to be able to just even wake up and get up and stretch my legs, even if it's a case of just walking to the front door or, you know, going to the kitchen or whatever. I do think it's really important that, you know, everything that we've discussed today, Emma, I think it's very much trial and error and not being hard upon yourself. And just making sure that, you know, whether it's in confined spaces or if you've got the luxury of a huge space, is just making sure you're having that time to get away from your machines, as I like to call it, your laptops, and that you're able to, at least, even if it's stretching your legs for a couple of moments, doing that. So, you know, just as a reminder, we have got our next webinar, which is on the 18th, which takes a bit more about some of the stuff we've talked about today, but gives it a much more wider view on different perspective on how to take care of your mental health and well-being. I really want to thank you again, Emma, for joining today. I always enjoy our sessions, and I look forward to many more other sessions that we have. If you've got if for any more information or contact, please contact our media team on the website, on the email address that you can see on your screens now. And as Emma mentioned, most of our resources are already on our website to go to. We will be sharing the My Whole Self resources specifically on the 10th, if not before that. So just keep looking out on our website, is what I keep saying, or on our social media platforms. We will inform you as and when we release things, and you will get this recording and the materials to follow. So all I can say is thank you all for taking your lunch hour, and I hope you found this really informative. Thank you again, Emma, for sharing your golden nuggets. And
Thank you.
helping with the questions.
Yeah, it's always good to talk. So yeah, it's
know,
great.
right?
Thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. So on that note, I will wish everybody a lovely day and a lovely weekend ahead when it arrives. And just try and take your happy hour today and just do things that you love and that make you happy.
Yeah.